Hi everyone, welcome to Mernda Central Science Labs. I'm Marcus.
And I'm Betty.
And we're your
Lab
techs. So today's topic is the kidneys, and the kidneys are a really important organ in our body. So we're going to be looking at the kidney today, and we're going to be dissecting it and looking at the structures, of course. Now the kidneys are a bean-shaped sort of shaped organ, and we have two of them in our body. And they do a really important thing for us. They remove waste from our blood. Without removing waste from our blood, we'd very quickly die because the waste would build up and the toxins would actually kill us. People without functioning kidneys have to go on a machine called a dialysis machine. The dialysis machine does the job of the kidney for us, but it has to be done every single day. Other things that the kidneys do for us is that they regulate our pH, so whether the blood is acid or not, and they do that by removing or keeping certain elements of our blood to make sure the balance of the pH is correct. They also regulate our blood pressure, so they regulate how much pressure it takes for the heart to pump our blood around the body. And they also keep things in our blood that we need, things like glucose. They actually reabsorb the glucose and keep it in the blood and don't let it go out through the urine. It also has hormones associated with it. This structure on the top of the kidney is the adrenal gland. On the kidney we're going to dissect today, you won't see the adrenal gland because it's usually taken off. But that produces adrenaline, which can increase our heart rate, can change our blood pressure. It's usually what they call a danger response hormone. Now the kidneys themselves are found in the lower abdominal cavity of the body. Now if we look over on our friend here, if we remove all the intestines and the liver and such out of the model, we'll just take them out carefully and take out the bottom intestine as well. And the kidneys are these two bean-shaped organs at the back of the abdominal cavity. And we won't be looking at a whole sheep when we dissect the thing, but that's the location they're found in the sheep as well. The purpose for our experiment today is to get a sheep's kidney. We're going to do a transverse dissection through the kidney itself, open it up. We're going to have a look inside the kidney, and we're going to try to identify the different structures that are inside the kidney and to understand what their functions are. Alright, so the materials for our experiment today, or our dissection today, are going to be obviously the safety equipment as always, safety glasses to keep splatters out of your eyes, a lab coat to keep the materials off your clothes, of course, and gloves to keep all blood products essentially away from your skin and possible cuts on your skin and such. Other than that, we're going to have a dissecting tray. We're going to have a set of dissecting instruments, of course, forceps, a sharp scalpel, and some dissecting scissors. Of course, we're going to need our specimens, so we're going to need a sheep's kidney to dissect, which we get from the butchers, of course. And we'll also have a model here to be able to show some of the parts more clearly to help explain what we're looking at. Alright, so to start off with our dissection, we're going to have a look at the outside of the kidney and have a look at a few of the parts that you can see from the outside before we cut the kidney in half. So if you zoom down on the kidney here, and we'll have a bit of a look at what we can see. Now there's two blood vessels that come out of the middle section of the kidney here. One is thick and muscular. And if you remember from your heart dissection, thick and muscular blood vessels are arteries. So that's the artery taking the blood to the kidney from the body. And the thinner blood vessels are the veins. So that is the renal vein taking the blood away from the kidney. So renal artery and renal vein. Other than that, the kidney is pretty much uniform on the outside. Other than that, the outside layer of the kidney is called the renal cortex. And we'll talk a little bit more about the renal cortex and what structures it contains once we get inside the kidney. Okay, so what we're going to do with the kidney today, we're going to do a transverse dissection, and our transverse means a cross section. So we're going to go across the kidney to show the internal structures. So if we zoom down onto the kidney, we'll have the blood vessels out the side here so you can see where the blood vessels are. Because we want to do a cut just above the blood vessels to try, and it's quite difficult to do. So I'm just going to try slice it. This is where a sharp scalpel is really important. Alright, we're getting there, just very slow and cumbersome. Okay, so we're starting to get through the kidney here. Starting to show some of the structures here, so we'll just use the pair of forceps to hold it a bit while we continue to slice. And we want to try slice to the outside of the kidney. There we go. Alright, so there's our kidney cross-section or transverse dissection of a kidney. Alright, so now we have our kidney dissected with a transverse dissection. It's now time to go through all the different parts and to identify the parts and talk about their structure and function. We go from the renal cortex here, which contains the main part of the nephrons, which are the filtering units of the kidney, which are microscopic. The nephrons have tubules that come down into the renal pyramids, which are together make up the renal medulla. And from the tubules you get the waste products filtering out into the calyxes, which are the branches of these white branches coming back down into the renal pelvis. The renal pelvis is a collecting area where the waste products are being collected before they go out through one of the through a duct here, although you can't see it easily, called the ureter, which goes to the bladder to take the waste products out of the body. The nephron is the filtering unit of the kidney and is microscopic. It has a cup in the cortex and a long tube that extends into the medulla. A large part of the blood's liquid filters into the cup and then travels through the tube through the renal pyramids and into the pelvis as urine. Along the way, the things the body needs filter back from the tube into the surrounding capillaries to be used by the body again. Alright, so the other part of the kidney that you can't see as easily are the blood vessels of the kidney. Now the blood vessels of the kidney come in through the artery, so the thick artery here. They're not very obvious, but the artery branches out through all the renal medulla, through the renal pyramids here, and they take the blood to those nephrons on the outside of the kidney in that renal cortex for where the blood's going to be filtered. And from that renal cortex, they then branch back through the renal capillaries back through to the renal vein, and then exit through the body out through the renal vein. What have we learned today? We've learned that the kidneys are a really important pair of organs in our body, and that they have lots of different functions. Their main function is to remove waste from our body so we don't die from the toxins building up in our blood. They also regulate the pH of our blood, know how acidic or alkaline it is. They also regulate our blood pressure, so how much pressure it takes for our heart to pump blood around the body. And they also make sure that we reabsorb things into our blood that we need to keep, things like glucose for instance. Now when we did our dissection, we did a transverse dissection of our kidney, which means a cross section. And we cut off the front of the kidney. Now in this particular case, this model has the adrenal gland on top still, which our kidney didn't have because it's usually removed by the butchers. But when we do our transverse dissection, we get the structure of the kidney. Now the outside layer here is the renal cortex. Now the renal cortex contains the main part of the microscopic structures called nephrons, which do the filtering of our blood. Now the nephrons have long tubules that go into the renal pyramids, which are those red structures there. If I use a pen it might be easier to see. And that's where all the materials that get filtered out of your blood come from. Those long tubules are surrounded by blood vessels, and those blood vessels bring the blood to those tubules. The waste then filter into those tubules and drain into these little branches, tree branches here that we saw in our dissection called calyxes, and into the renal pelvis, which is just a big collecting area for all the waste. From the renal pelvis here, it then drains out through this tube here, which on our dissection was missing because it had been cut off by the butcher. But it drains from the pelvis, through the ureter here, and off to the bladder where it's going to be excreted from the body. That's the kidneys and what they do, how they function, why they're important. I hope you've learned something today and that you appreciate your kidneys just that little bit more. Alright guys, that's it from Mernda Central Science Labs for now. Bye from me, Marcus.
And bye from me, Betty.